used to have rhymes that we used to sing, you know. Here's Maggie Thatcher, throw up and catch her, squish, squash, there's Maggie Thatcher. Before the strike, there was living at home with my dad and my mum.
As a family, my mum and dad were great, you know. We had a great childhood and didn't want for anything.
Life was generally fine, pretty much a typical teenager, really.
I was just a happy-go-lucky young boy.
I was fortunate to have a brilliant childhood within a loving family.
I had a paper round, a milk round, I had a strong work ethic. It was always instilled in me to go and work.
Yeah, life was good, happy, everybody was working. Not a huge amount of money, but enough to live decently on.
I was just your typical average ordinary kid. I was 16 and enjoyed hanging about the leisure centre and going roller skating with my friends.
Before the strike, we were just a normal working class family.
We had a real exciting village life. People had jobs, they had prospect. I remember the miners' galas.
There was a deep sense of community at the time. Like, we were neighbours. Most of them either worked in the pit or factories in the area.
Before the strike, these streets were busy. People were well off, or at least working and doing okay.
It was just so brilliant. Everyone knew each other. The whole village was like a big family, and the one thing that held everyone together was the mine.
I was only 13 when the strike was on, so before that I hadn't really thought of a career. I certainly didn't want to go down the pit. My dad had always advised us against working down the pit, and to be honest, I didn't really want to. From what I've been told, it just seemed like really hard work and cramped, miserable conditions.
When the strike started off, there was a lot of media coverage and stuff, and obviously my dad wasn't going to work, and then you seen the pit buses going by with cages on the windows. Like, we were told that there wasn't going to be much money. There was a strike centre opened up at the local community centre. We went there but as a kid, you didn't realise the enormity of it at 12 years age.
I was pretty worried, to be honest, because I thought, well, how's it going to affect me if my dad's not working? How are we going to live? Will I still be able to stay on at school? Will I be expected to go out and find a job to bring money into the family? As it was, I actually had a paper round from being 14 years old. So when the strike did hit, that was it. I became a breadwinner for the family as well. I tipped up all my paper round money, and all the tips I used to get on a Saturday, that went straight over to Mum.
I don't recall the strike itself actually starting. I think, although it started in the March, I think it was probably the summer before it began to impact on the community. First and foremost, your dad was at home all day, which is unusual because your dad's at work 40 hours a week or whatever his shift pattern is. And my dad, like most miners, worked in a 3-shift pattern, but he was there all the time. So I was spending more time with my dad, which is good when you're a wee boy. Playing football with me and things like that. And of course he was away doing things, and I wasn't aware what it was. He was obviously on picket duty.
Voices down the ages warning, never cross a picket line.
My dad's on the picket line at Elton, so I get on my bike, says I'm going to watch one of these picket lines. Tell us to keep away, tell us to not get anywhere near. And there's my dad sitting on the fence, so I kept out the way, and I just watched from a distance. And he's just sitting on the fence, quite normal. This was obviously before he had his stroke and stuff like this. And then the buses came where the people going to walk. And my dad just jumped off the fence. "You bastards!" You know? And Dad swore. Never heard him swear before, never heard it, you know. And it was like, I was just, and then he got his eye on us, and then he didn't have to tell us.
And I'd often hear the miners trying to heckle the police, or the police being loud, and you know. So I'd cry a lot. I'd stick my head under the covers and I'd cry. Even though I knew my dad was in the bedroom, my dad wasn't there, I'd still cry. It still used to terrify me.
The fear as well, when I knew my dad was going on the picket line, because I saw on the news what was going on, and the thought that my dad could be hurt by some policeman's truncheon.
And then you start to harden up to it, and you started to get used to it. And I think there was a time when it got a bit rough up at the picket, and I didn't really feel anything because I knew my dad was this big burly guy who could look after himself anyway. Whereas a month or so before that, I'd sit there and cry my eyes out, Dad, 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 you know, and that's how it changed you.
It was Orgreave, and my dad was there, and the police charged the miners, and my mum crying, saying, your dad's there. And I was a bit taken aback. What's my dad done? It's so bad that the police were beating them up.
My dad was actually arrested for unlawful picketing. It was very hard to understand then that somebody had taken your dad away. So an 8 and 9 year old.
I absolutely was petrified that one day my dad was going to come in with a bust head. You cannot show that, not when you know that your mum and dad are going through a hard time trying to keep a roof over heads and foods and bellies. You cannot add to that burden, you just keep that kind of to yourself, that kind of hurt to yourself and the fear. I cannot remember talking to anybody about it really. I think this is really like the first time that I've acknowledged I was scared for my dad.
I mean, I used to frequently go up to the picket line to see my dad, or just because we were bored and we used to go up there, and believe me, there was a lot of foul language came from them police officers. There was 1 or 2 of them that were nice, but the majority of them were very nasty.
For the dockers have realised you must never cross a picket line.
Before the miners' strike, the police were somebody there to look after you, to help you out. You know, it's the usual thing that a 12-year-old might think of the police.
There was 2 or 3 local coppers. Guys that I knew quite well, always spoke to them and all that. They would always be nosy about, that's the copper's job. But during the strike, they brought in guys that weren't local, and the full texture of the dynamic changed.
And it did change the village in that sense, you know. Before that, you could walk around and be free and do the usual things that they say now, where we'd stay outside and play until 10 o'clock till the street lights came on. But that suddenly changed. You didn't feel safe. Certainly if there were only 1 or 2 of you, you didn't feel safe. And if you didn't have an adult, you didn't feel safe either.
We'd only ever seen 2 cops at a time, that was your usual. Maybe on a Saturday night you'd see a van load of them. Now you were seeing dozens.
Police on horseback charging down essentially a very, very small village street was just so harrowing and scary.
The cop vans with their gridded windows, and they were quite intimidating.
You seen it on the television, them steaming in with batons, and the men weren't doing nothing, they were just protesting. They were protesting, and if you can't protest, where's your freedom?
You know, they'd go up picket lines and they'd just push, what they call pushing. They'd link arms and push it against women, against barbed wire, just as if they were men. There were no, oh, these are women and they're men. Everybody was treated the same. You were shoved, you were poked, you were punched, you were kicked, whatever. When we've been coming out of school and you've had police stood there waving the wage slips, thanks for overtime, and take your little shit home. And
because we had a lot of local bobbies in the area, which they were beat bobbies, so you knew them by name, and they knew it wasn't them, it was the Met what came in.
The Met worse than any of them. By an absolute country mile, that lot were evil. Evil.
I remember going to work, you know, in the morning, and stand at the bus stop waiting to get picked up. And police thinking I was going on the picket line. But he says, where you going? But he said it in a sarcastic, nasty way, you know? And I just totally ignored him. And he just got really abusive, this copper, you know? And I just thought, yeah, this is what they're up against.
The picket line, it was maybe a mile walk from my home. We got less than a third of the way there, and it was late-ish on 10 o'clock on a night, summer's night. Police flying by, stopped and asked us where we was all going and what we was all doing and one thing or another, which was very intimidating for me. We hadn't got 400 yards when another set of police officers, this time in a van, came and asked us.
My brother got arrested when he was doing it at Nottingham. He had cable ties, not cuffs, cable ties on his arms.
The pit buses would be going by, or the Jowl and Dodge lorries taking the coal would be going by, would be going past, and as kids we were shouting at them, or maybe somebody would be throwing stones or whatever, and the police they could be quite physical with the youngsters as well, but we would run to the community centre, and then the miners would come out, if the police even came to the doors.
One of the things the strike did change in me, I had been brought up to respect the police. Maybe not to love them. The working classes don't tend to like the police very much anyway, but I was told to respect them. After the strike, no. Hatred. My dad loathed them. My mum hated them too. And this, of course, goes right out through the community.
I don't respect authority at all. Not at all. I live within the laws, but I don't respect the people who make and uphold them. Never.
During the miners' strike, I did. My views on the police definitely changed. The police are meant to help you. They're meant to be brought up to respect it, and then you see them beating up miners, and when you think about it, they were only being Maggie Thatcher's patsies.
It was hatred, loathing. And these guys who had been local coppers afterwards were left to deal with this. They got a lot of grief.
One of the lads in my year came in and he looked really, really glum. Never seen face like thunder. And we had says, hey, what's up? And he went, my dad's gone back.
Actually, two of my closest friends when I was at school, it was a bit of a strange situation because one of them was a son of a policeman and the other one was a son of a colliery bus driver who was taking the working miners to work.
My mother always said, even though Scab's kids' dads went to work, they're always welcome in this house. The kids are always welcome in this house. We cannot ever take out on the kids what the fathers are doing.
And he went, how the hell can I face you guys? How can I come into school and look yous in the eye knowing my dad's back at work and yours are still on the picket line? We just went, it's your dad, not you.
We had one friend who, if he was seen with us, to striking miners' kids, if his dad saw his dad were a working miner who had a 24/7 police, you know, like looking out for him on his doorstep, but if his dad came home from work or escorted back from work and he saw him playing with us, he used to get some fist. Yeah.
There was single kids that I'm aware of that were children of Scabs, and they did get a bit of stick. I personally remember headbutting a guy at secondary school and calling him a scab. I don't know why. I think it was just one of these stupid teenage things. I'm still embarrassed about it when I think about it. Funnily enough, I'm still friends with the guy.
I remember going to my friend's house one night and his dad was getting ready for work and he was all dressed in black with a black balaclava on, and it just seemed quite surreal and a bit strange.
There was a sense of you knew who had gone back, because your dad would go from chatting to them one week to the next week, that was it, stony face, walk past, you know, blank them,
And I'd asked my mum what would happen if Dad said that he was going to go back to work with him, he'd had enough. But my mum's reply shocked me, because she said, if your dad went back to work, he wouldn't be the man I married. So I had occasion to ask my dad what would happen if Mum asked you to go back to work. And he said, well, that'd be the end of us.
You could see it in the streets. I mean, there was sometimes you'd hear people shouting along the avenue, often, you know, scab and lots of other things as well. But and sometimes you'd see fights. There was a fight at the bottom of the street one day.
My dad was going picketing, and the word got round that was being picked up to go to work, and somebody went, no, he's not scab. So we had to go to the union, say to him, look, can you let everybody know I'm going picketing, I'm not working.
Seeing a house boarded up on Castle Terrace, and the rumour was that the windows had been put out because they thought it was a working miner. Apparently it was a mistake.
I've seen my mum with skirting her knickers and fighting with next door neighbours, and daily rows of at fence about whether neighbours should be going to work and one thing and another. Obviously violence was not always the best scenario, but like I said before, they were fighting for the jobs, for the lives, for the families, for the kids.
Even my own mother will not speak to people who went to work during the strike.
I remember the one specific family where the brother, he went back, but the father didn't, and that ripped that family. I don't know if they ever sorted themselves out. I know it's not a solitary case that happened in more than one occasion. I mean, that's where it turns into a civil war almost.
Well, I had an uncle that went back to work. My dad didn't hold a grudge against him. I mean, there was an argument, they fell out. And when my dad died, my uncle was sorry that they didn't make up.
That animosity stayed for quite a few years.
My mum and dad had 3 kids and a mortgage. They weren't in a council house. I mean, the council wasn't going to just let them say, we were looking at eviction. My argument has always been, and my anger is still there. There's absolutely no doubt about it. It's rage at times. If we could do it, so could anybody else. And that's why, to this day, I don't have hatred for scabs, I have contempt.
These are guys that all worked together, side by side. They had each other's backs down there. What's a dangerous and dirty job. And for them to turn around after 6 months of being on strike and say, I'm going back, it's just bizarre.
There are still families where brothers won't speak to each other, where, you know, the dad won't speak to the son because the son went back. Families that cross the street from each other.
In other families, you know, that even now people didn't speak. But my dad wasn't like that. If people spoke to him, he would speak to them. You know, he wouldn't forget what they're doing, or if they crossed them. But he didn't hold a grudge.
I have to work with men that work during strike. I find that difficult. I have to hold my tongue because it's my job. Do I like it? Could I kick off about it? Yeah. But I have to accept it. It gripes me, but I have to accept it.
In the river bank, there was a coal seam, and there was loads of people going down there to get coal from this coal seam. And I mean, it was dangerous because they were just digging into the coal seam, pulling the coal. And me and my mates went, oh, let's go and do and get some coal. You know, my mum and dad will be over the moon for bringing a bag of coal back.
And we had to go on tips foraging for coal, because obviously we'd all got coal fires, and trying to forage for this coal, it was demeaning in one way because you knew you were trespassing.
Cold in the winter, mind. Very cold in the winter. I can remember ice on the inside of my bedroom window, because it was bloody cold. No central heating or anything like that.
Our houses there was what's called miners' house, pit houses. And whilst my mum and dad bought theirs, it didn't have central heating. There was no gas. So it was a coal-fired back boiler. So no coal fire, no heat, no water, no hot water.
People, I suppose, were, you know, like chopping down trees for the burn, things like this, you know, that was happening.
Well, another hardship was seeing my dad sent to prison for merely stealing coal to keep his family warm. You know, seeing my dad cry for the first time. Big, burly, strong miner that I looked up to, and he wept his eyes out when he saw us. You know, he was made an example of in that instance. You know, they didn't hide that fact that they were making an example of these miners. Prior to the strike, you'd open the cupboards on a Thursday and there'd still be food in the cupboard before Mum did Friday's shop. You open the cupboards on Thursday during the miners' strike and there was nothing in there.
Lack of food basically. That was the main overriding memory. Lack of food, lack of variety of food.
To have to try for a year to feed a family of 5 on a pittance, I'm surprised she didn't have a nervous breakdown.
We were getting food parcels. I don't know exactly where these food parcels were coming from, but I believe they were coming from all over Europe.
There was a lot of food that was imported, sent over from places like Norway and, you know, as far afield as Sweden, places like that. And I always remember being down at the Armed Folk Welfare, or the Welly as they called it, going through it all with my mum and holding this up and like, is this Polish or is it Norwegian? You know, we didn't know exactly what was in the tins as such, but you know, yeah, it was hard.
I remember this box appearing on the kitchen table, and it was like Christmas. It was like, what the hell's inside? But what struck me at the time was the generosity of somebody in a different country, you know, Russian miners, sending it to show solidarity, as it is, to fellow miners way across Europe.
I used to get free school dinners at school, and when it were on our school holidays, we used to have to go to a different school and get a packed lunch. So we still got a meal.
It wasn't nice being hungry some of the time, but the one saving grace I had was that I got a meal at school. Whereas I often think sometimes my parents were having their first meal when I came in at tea time.
I can always remember my mum saying, thank God we can get something to eat. She says, I'm sick of eating marrowfat peas, because obviously they were the cheapest veg to get then.
Every day we always had a hot meal down at the soup kitchen, which was down to my mum and the other ladies in the Action Committee team.
I went once with my mum, and there was a trestle tables down one side of the church, and there was like big cauldrons of soup, and there was soup and a packet of crisps, and I think you got a glass of pop as well. But I was 17 and I was really sensitive, and I just felt like I don't want your charity.
My mum used to send me up the reservoir to catch fish to eat, and that's true. I used to, and the Owians round about the estate would ask me to go and catch some rabbits.
A lot of turnips went missing from farmers' fields that year. A lot of leeks, a lot of fence posts got missing. But it was sheer ingenuity, what you did, how you got this little bit of food and how you stretched it.
The only reason that our family actually managed to survive was because the local greengrocer, who was a businessman and you would expect to be against that sort of thing, extended my mum and dad some credit.
The shops in general, they all did their bit. You know, they lowered the prices. Not every, but most of them. We had one in particular, a baker's shop in Armthorpe, and Howard, and he was absolutely fantastic. We'd walk past as kids, and he'd be like, "Younger lads," and he'd give us a bread cake each to walk around with.
Local chip shop, a couple of big bags of taters every week. Local spar shop, tins of beans, tray of Irish stew, which were a big thing then. New potatoes. These are all people what helped us and many others like me through it all.
We had neighbours, they would shout us at tea time, they got food for us, they would give us anything. It was just how amazing how everybody pulled together.
I remember the Christmas of '84, I think it was the Russians, gave us Christmas presents. I remember my brother, I don't remember what I got. I would have got something, but I remember my wee brothers getting, because they were just kids. I mean, although I was a child, I was 12, they were only like 5 and 7 or something like that. So they got toys. I remember a castle.
I had no expectations for Christmas at all. I just didn't expect anything at all. And there was a couple of presents there under the tree. You know, it was basic things like a football, and you know, it was just small things. But at least it still felt like Christmas.
That Christmas, we knew it was going to be tight. And I got this watch, and I didn't expect it. You know, didn't expect to get this watch. I don't think it was a really expensive one, but it was more than I expected, and it meant a hell of a lot to us. When people get a watch at Christmas, I always think of that watch.
That Christmas, we did get presents, but we knew that there was something wrong.
Present mountain weren't as big, but it were there. The presents, to be honest, weren't that great, but we were grateful.
There wasn't that huge bundle there. There was still a few things to open on Christmas Day morning.
I got a big galleon, I got the Rosemary. I got told it was the Polish miners that had sent us that.
It's my little brother. He was only 6. He asked what was for Christmas. And my dad said the Prime Minister had shot Sandy. And my brother started crying, which started my mum crying, which started me crying. So, yeah, it was a pretty bloody tough time.
We knew how much as parents were going through. You knew there wasn't much money, so what little you did get, you appreciated more.
It's like this year, I didn't ask for anything, because I just kind of knew things were tight.
When I knew there wasn't a wage coming in the house, I knew there wasn't nothing, no benefits, nothing coming in the house.
My grandparents had bought a turkey, so I actually had turkey for a Christmas lunch, which was fantastic.
I was lucky. I had one set of my grandparents working in the mines, and they helped us out. But for a lot of other children, it must have been a horrible year where the only income coming in that house was for their dad's wage at the pit.
By the end of my schooling in '88, there was no expectation of jobs at all, by anyone. Lack of work creates stress for people. The lack of money creates stress. You get guys who are used to getting up every morning and going to their work, and by the time they come home, they're tired, all they're wanting is their dinner, they sit down, have their dinner, maybe go for a couple of pints, come home, go to bed, get up the next morning, do it again. You take that away from them, you take that structure away from them, they are bored. And the devil makes works for idle hands.
Like my dad, been a miner all his life, and then somebody just, I suppose it is like taking your life, your livable life, and just like taking it away. You know, he were a broken man by the time they finished at pit.
After the miners' strike, and then when the pits shut down, and then all the factories shut down, that sense of community disappeared. Everybody, there was no jobs, the crime rate went through the roof, there was high unemployment.
And you come just after the strike, and God, these guys with redundancy killed a lot of people, because all they were doing was drinking and drinking and drinking, and relationships were falling to bits.
The shouting, and what was really upsetting was these were, sorry again, a bit emotional, but families were being torn apart, and it was hard to see families fighting with each other because of what was happening. And we just knew something was wrong.
This impacts onto the children. They see it. They may not be fully aware of it, but it penetrates the local psyche. And the kids are bored now, and the dad's getting angry, and dad's maybe drinking a wee bit more, and mum and dad are arguing and fighting, and this is happening everywhere. Not just one or two houses, but full streets. The pubs were heaving.
If kids weren't academically gifted leaving school, they were getting involved in drink and drugs, and there was no education about drinking drugs at that time, and a lot of people went down the road They're either dead or they're in prison.
There was 4 schools in my village, and every single one of them was burnt to the ground. Arson was huge. People were glue sniffing on the streets. You'd have children roaming around the street with no shoes on. People were gas sniffing, fighting. The amount of drugs that came into that village was rife, and there was a whole generation, a generation above me, that got addicted to heroin, and a lot of them died, and I completely blame 100% the strike of '84 and what happened as a result of that.
There was a big drugs epidemic in Armthorpe. The whole village itself just changed almost overnight.
Drugs everywhere, it's just depressing, to be honest, and it never were like that when mines were up, and you'd have a thriving community where, you know, men had finished the stints at pit, the shifts, they'd go and have a booze, and then home. The shops were raring, if you like, and it's all gone. It's like a ghost town, really.
When the pits were open and during the strike, drugs were never heard of. And there was maybe a bit of wacky-backy, but after the miners' strike, and there was high unemployment, and drugs and different things started seeping into the area, and nobody was educated in it.
Drugs had taken over, and nobody had any money, and people were robbing people's sheds. That didn't happen. When that mine was open, that did not happen.
At the age of 20, 21, went into a house and we were getting to smoke cannabis, but the boy that was there didn't have cannabis, he was smoking heroin, and I ended up involved with heroin. My best pal, he died through drugs. My dad died through drink.
Still affects me now, does the miners' strike, because I lost them friends. And I lost them friends because the miners' strike happened and they closed the pit. So even now, it still affects me. I say, I want to talk about it and get it off my chest so maybe I can drop that demon, but I don't know if it will work, because I still miss them guys inside. The kids that I grew up with, you know, they had my back, if you want, you know. They're gone.
When the mines is gone, there's not a lot left for industries. This is a working class town built on working class principles, and watching the mines go and not be replaced with something to keep the men in employment, it kind of ripped the heart out of the town, you know. We're proud, and I'm not ashamed to say I come from Ashington. It's a damned hard-working town with a good working ethic, but unfortunately there isn't the industries here at the minute. It's become a commuter town. People go and work, like myself in Newcastle, we'll live here, but certainly don't work here.
This area, really, the way it is today, it goes right back to the strike, in my opinion. Because before the strike, these streets were busy, people were well off, or at least working and doing okay. Shops were here, there was big apartment store. This place we're sitting in the day was it's empty the day because nobody's got any money to spend in it, you know, but it was a big apartment store, and so was the rest of the street, had plenty of places where you could get different stuff. Now it's empty, or, you know, at least compared to what it was then.
What happens here has been mirrored in Durham and in South Wales. I think it needs an injection of capital and ideas to get it back and running again.
The whole area has died because of the pits. They took the pits away, but they didn't replace it with anything.
We've got to remember that the whole village was built around this coal mine. It didn't exist before. The reason why the village is there is because of the mine. You take away the mine from that village and it has absolutely nothing. Not only the pit went, but everything else went. All of the shops closed down. There was no business anymore. No one had a car. The nearest town is 10 miles away. What do? So suddenly the whole village fell in on itself and imploded. You know, men that were used to getting up and working a 40-hour shift a week, sweating and working to feed their family and support their family, were suddenly lost, devastated. So they just went to the pub and drowned their sorrows in alcohol. And with that came depression and sadness and bitterness and loss of hope, loss of prospect, loss of respect for the government, loss of respect for each other, loss of respect for the working classes. And then what we all had to do is watch the pit get blown up with dynamite. We actually saw it collapse. And we all had a black balloon. And the minute the last tower went down, we let this balloon go into the sky, and that was it. That was the end of Grimethorpe. It really was a horrible time. It was a horrible time as a teenager growing up.
When the government had a plan to like close an industry, you know, not just one pit, but the whole industry and the whole area, and leave it just barren, to me was just like, right, they just raped the area really of its jobs, and then turn around and say, find a job.
Because the mine was the lifeblood of the town. You know, some people have blood going through our veins. I think we've all got coal dust. You know, our blood's full of coal dust, and it doesn't matter to me what I achieve in life. I'm still going to be a miner's daughter, and I'm damn well proud of that.
I am a striking miner's son, and I will take that to my grave, and I am proud to be that, and I am proud that my dad was a striking miner.
The thing that makes me sad about it is this area, and I remember before the strike that there was a deep sense of community, but after the miners' strike and then when the pits shut down and then all the factories shut down, that sense of community disappeared.
It destroyed people. People that weren't involved in strike, they'll always say to me, get over it, leave it, it's history. Yeah, it is history, but it's part of mine and other people's lives. And when you see your dad being taken away, your mum being abused by coppers, your mum going on picket lines and coming back with stories that they've been assaulted by police, you can't forget that. There's no way on God's earth you can forget that. Never. Never. Never.
Well, it's hard to